this is the Liquidity Book workshop number 2. If you missed the first one, don't worry, it's on YouTube. You can watch it as me and Davide babbled through a Google Meet in a very unsynchronized breakdown of Liquidity Book. This one, I think, is a bit more focused, so hopefully it's a bit smoother. So Liquidity Book number 2, how do I change? Here we go. So I expect, this is a trade offer. I'm sure all of you have seen this meme. So I and Davide, we expect to receive your full attention and engagement for the next roughly 45 minutes. I do have another call at 9 p.m. my time. That's in 50 minutes. So I do need to dash off relatively quickly. Can't hang over an hour, but I don't think it'll last an hour. That trade offer, after your full attention and engagement, is you receive an educational how-to guide for deploying liquidity on the most powerful and efficient, flexible, versatile, customizable AMM in DeFi. That is Liquidity Book, of course. So this is a how-to guide. Sorry?
I can confirm the blue looks like the man in this picture on all his calls.
What? No, I don't. I don't look like that. What are you talking? He's got really long hair. I've definitely got a better beard than him.
Moving on.
Moving on. So I guess this is these are the big disclaimers. This is a strategy workshop. This will help to inform you how to deploy different shapes, liquidity shapes, to execute different liquidity strategies or market making strategies that you may have. It's educational, it's not financial advice. You must always do your own research. And using concentrated liquidity or discretized liquidity via Liquidity Book, it is a complex and risky undertaking. So that is kind of like an overview. And ultimately, like why are we hosting this workshop? Some of you, certainly perhaps for the first time, when you've wanted to supply liquidity into a Liquidity Book pool, you've probably clicked into a pool. It's probably shown you this UI that you can see in front of you now via the screen, and you probably wondered, what is it? What do I do? Like, how does it work? What are these shapes? Like, what is a liquidity shape, right? Most of us prior to this, certainly on Avalanche, probably all very familiar with liquidity pools and yield farming, and you would have been accustomed to depositing your 50-50 split of tokens into a pool. It would have done that automatically for you as well, so you don't even have to enter different numbers. You just enter one number and you deposit, and it does the other side automatically. And that's the one market making strategy that Liquidity Book offers for a very long period of time. However, you come to Liquidity Book, your first undertaking of active liquidity provisioning. There's different shapes. There's a price range. You enter tokens. It doesn't automatically, populate a 50-50 split. It lets you enter whatever amount of tokens on either side of the pool that you want to. And there's even this fancy toggle called bin radius. What is this? What's a bin? So all of these questions probably flew through your mind, and it's really confusing. And ultimately, all you want to do is put your tokens into this liquidity pool to earn fees. And that's why we're having this workshop, is to kind of run down some of the most basic kind of liquidity shapes you can deploy. And that's one of the main kind of, not necessarily pain points, but feedback points we've seen in the community. Whilst Liquidity Book is powerful, it is complicated. Managing your position is difficult. It's not easy. You can't just deposit your tokens and come back a number of months later and expect to see rewards. You most likely have to check multiple times a day. You have to monitor your active liquidity when it's deposited into Liquidity Book. And while this all may seem confusing and hard to grasp initially, the good news is, and we've seen evidence of this within the community, once you start to understand what's on the UI, how to deposit and deploy liquidity, how to execute your strategies, it does get easier. It is, I would say, it is the easiest AMM to use when you want to kind of deploy your active liquidity. It's way more flexible as well. There is a ton of different shapes and strategies you can deploy with Liquidity Book because it is built to facilitate that type of user experience of where you can customize. And we're going to go through, I think, 11 different shapes, 10 different shapes. And they're not all different strategies, but this workshop will give you that insight into the level of customization that you have with Liquidity Book, and that is above other AMMs in the space as well. So you can really get granular, even in its current form, with your strategy. I'm going to pause there very quickly because I'm just going to check the chats. Do we have any questions at this point? No. Apart from Jerry, been actively explaining Liquidity Book to my wife for 2 weeks now. I'm not sure if that's good. Jerry, what is when you explain it to her? I mean, is she even active in DeFi? I'm kind of curious to see that feedback. What would a non-crypto native
question from? I'm curious to know what was the most intelligent and deep question that she asked about it.
This is yeah. Damn, Jerry, if that's your wife. She only knows what I've told her. Okay, at least she listens. All she says is to get a whiteboard because it's too confusing. Okay.
So it's funny. I think that most of the people that say I'm going to study Liquidity Book, if they will just try to do a small position with sense, so without exposing any capital, but just trying to deploy the minimum possible, they will understand way more in one single transaction than in one day of studying everything. Because it is very simple once you get used to it and you click a few options and see the consequence of the various options you are interacting with, but might still be a question how it behaves if you are just trying to read about it.
Yes, practice by doing, not by reading. Is always the best way to learn. So we've got, I've kind of, we're kind of taking a big jump from the intro straight into a strategy here. But basically, this workshop, is not trying to onboard every single kind of small step. This really is a dive into some of the liquidity strategies and shapes. So I do think we've got a range of documentation on the support center to kind of help with some of the more basic stuff of what is Liquidity Book, and how is it different from other AMMs, or how you can use it. This workshop is to mainly dive into liquidity shapes. So we're going to start with Bywall, and just to kind of prime this a bit more, we put out some recent Twitter content. There was a thread kind of dives into the different liquidity shapes for your various strategies that you may want to deploy. And those are the shapes that we're mainly going to talk about in this workshop as well. So we're starting off with Bywall. This is in no particular order. I think there are 11, random order, but we're starting off with Bywall. And so Davide, have you set up a Bywall before? Is this a shape you've used?
I feel I am ready to set up a buy wall pretty soon, given the current market conditions.
I think there are some other people probably deploying this type of strategy at the moment. I've seen a lot of people saying they've started to DCA now, but with buy wall, it's not necessarily a dollar cost average kind of strategy. You're not necessarily using this type of shape to actually kind of DCA into a token. A buy wall could be used to simply use your capital to farm trading fees at a assumed support level for a token. So in this case, we've got USDC and AVAX. And what you'll notice is there are big green bars, many of them, and a few purple bars, right? And basically the big green bars, USDC, this is what's called a buy wall. So 80% of your liquidity in this example, I've set this up at $17 for AVAX, and it goes up to just pretty much about $17.75. That's pretty much what it goes up to. And my assumption here is I've taken a view of AVAX is at a good support level at around 17. I'm thinking based on my own conviction and analysis and various other indicators that AVAX isn't going lower than this, right? So I'm going to deploy some of my USDC tokens in this range. And what I'm expecting is I'm expecting AVAX to hover around this level, and maybe it goes up after. We know right now that the token's lower. Okay, so this screenshot was taken a number of days ago. So in this case, my strategy probably would have been wrong. However, this is basically a way for you to deploy some capital to farm what you think will be a price range at which support is found. And then maybe after a few days of price ranging around this, you may want to withdraw that capital. The main purpose of a buy wall or a sell wall is not to go into a token. It's mainly to set up, or it's mainly to add support or resistance to a price range and to farm some trading fees within the liquidity pool. Davide, do you want to add anything onto that?
Now, this is a particular strategy where indeed, as you mentioned, protect the price is also a way for some users that would like to offer deep liquidity in a specific range, assuming that one will expect in this example price to bounce back from 17. A buy wall basically decreases the impact of potential sale by offering more liquidity on that side, so decreasing the amount of pressure that users on the sell side will give on the pair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's a buy wall. I didn't put sell wall here. So I've seen a number of users in the community actually share kind of shapes kind of similar to this. And this is kind of like you want to take it a step further. So this could be a buy wall, and the title is buy wall and volatility capture. So this is when you've got, and as I said, I've seen some community members kind of share their thesis around certain tokens that have a range within, I don't know, let's just say we've got the example here, USDC and AVAX, about 17 as the support, and then it ranges up to, in this example, just short of 19. So kind of a relatively big range, and versatile in terms of your ratio of tokens, but this is essentially a buy wall, as in the previous example, where you expect support to be around that 17 level for AVAX. You positioned the majority of your liquidity around a relatively big range on that price point because you expect more trading to happen around there. You're trying to pick up more fees within that specific support range, because often when price hits that, bang on support or resistance, you have big influxes trading happening, and that's where you can pick up some good fees. And then this shape goes one step further with that kind of volatility capture side. So, maybe you've got this really specific TA, technical analysis conviction, and you're expecting some volatility to happen. If AVAX, for example, hits that support level, you're expecting a ping back up to close to 19, within the coming days, for example. And so you place some of your liquidity at that like bounce kind of resistance level. So very situational, and I think with this type of shape, you really got to have strong conviction and understanding around how prices can move within a certain range. But this is a really good example of how you can deploy multiple positions into one pool to fit a really specific type of strategy. Davide, any comments on that? Look, there you go. I'm just checking chat now. So Mount Doji shared a picture of almost a very similar strategy to this, and it's got a cat jumping in the middle, which is nice.
Jumping cat.
With the bin art, this is. Why not set a grid bot instead of liquidity deploy? Great question, Pong. A question from Pong. I'm really happy with that. A question for Davide. You've used grid bots before. I mean, Liquidity Book can, we talked about grid bots as well, didn't we?
A grid bot is 99% a centralized exchange product. So feel free to leave all your liquidity on a centralized exchange. That's your gist, but
it's not on trend at the moment.
I personally prefer to have my liquidity on chain, and actually grid bots on chain do not really exist at a level that simulate what centralized exchange grid bots do, as every single buy sell will need to be a non-chain interaction, so there will actually be very complex contracts. Liquidity Book, however, very much simulates for every bin one grid step. So if you do, for example, on products like there were 3 commas before everything that happened, where you will select to have 50 grids, of which each of them having like 100 bips of distance from each other. Liquidity Book with tokens that are actually configured with one bin every 100 bips do actually exactly the same without the burden of all the transaction that a SEX does. So with a centralized exchange, every time a grid is hit, you actually have a transaction, a buy and sell, which actually costs you fees, funny enough. So you pay to do a grid bot with fees, and whatever you earn from it is just the distance, a little fraction of the width of the grid. With Liquidity Book instead, every time a grid is fully traversed, you earn fully the fees of that specific bin. So let's say that you earn, let's imagine 0.80% from a specific position. You will earn 0.80% of your liquidity inside a bin every time the bin is traversed. So this is actually way better for you, as you don't have to incur all the transactions that will clutter your tax report. You don't have to go through all the bid and ask management. It's just bins are passively there and accrue fees as long as your position is there. And you actually get fees instead of paying them every time your bins are hit.
Pong, oh, there you go. Pong said thank you. So hopefully that was. Did not know the details. There you go. Good explanation. Thanks, Davide. Let's. Okay, so the next shape, concentrated curve. So this is one of the predefined or preset liquidity shapes on the UI. It's just called curve, but I titled it concentrated curve here because this shape, you can simply click it, enter the amount of tokens that you want and press deploy. It deploys over 11 bins, the central bin, and then you have 5 bins either side. This is not what we call is not a uniform distribution. So uniform is when all of the bins that are deployed, an equal liquidity amount is in those bins. So curve gives you a gradient kind of slope to your liquidity. So it deploys over 11 bins, but ultimately the majority of your liquidity will be in 5 bins. And so that means really this is a very concentrated shape that you can deploy. I don't think this is particularly good for any type of volatile token. In a liquidity book pool.
Like outside of the exact middle of a range.
Sorry,
So volatile indeed. So let's add some finessing to this. Is not good for volatile tokens, which go like a 20% up and down within unexpected times. Very not ideal. If, however, we are in a ranging market, in a ranging market which is not directional but potentially volatile, but still coming back to the mean, this is eventually a good curve.
Yeah, I mean it is heavily concentrated, pretty much around 5 bins, and just trying to touch on that. This is educational as well. It is not financial advice. I just want to be very clear on that. The example you got here, USDT and ETH, you can see the price range of curve is deployed over $1,556 up to $1,579 for ETH. So very concentrated in terms of the price range percentage movement that you've got there. And ultimately, it's all around the 5 bins of $1,567. So, if you're deploying this, you've really got to have strong conviction in a narrow price range that a potential token and liquidity pool could move. And you would have to stay carefully monitoring that price of a volatile token if you deploy it into a volatile liquidity pool such as ETH USDT. You may find an easier job with this shape in something like a pegged asset markets, wrapped Bitcoin and Bitcoin B. Probably not going to get too much movement between that. So you might find it a bit easier in the lower volatile pools. Anything else around that? Do you use Curve at all, Davide? Have you used it before? I tend to not use this.
I personally use Liquidity Book.
Very funny.
I have a question for you, Blue. Is this
Let's move on.
concentrated? Was that concentrated curve because it is concentrated liquidity?
It's concentrated curve because it's a concentrated shape on a discretized liquidity AMM.
Awesome.
I just seen we've got Uncertain on the stage, just chilling out. Oh no, he's left. Okay. We'll use this shape for AVAX. Oh, so Mount Doji shared a picture of curved. That is the old configuration of curve. It's spread over a wider amount of bins. We've recently updated it to be 11 bin spread. So I need to update that document. Okay, let's move on. So we've got, okay, you've seen them both here. I've spoiled it. Gradual ladder order in, gradual ladder order out. Commonly known as, well, referred to as DCAing in or out. DCAing stands for dollar cost average in or out. Basically a term of where you're deploying tokens with the intention that you want to either buy the other token or you want to sell your token for the other token. Yeah, and this is, we've seen this a number of times actually, interesting examples coming up, but the shape, just to explain the shape that you've got in front of you, basically the same. So I'm going to stay on this one. So in this example, gradual ladder order out. This is the USDC pool with AVAX, and the position on the screen right now, there are 5 purple bins. That's AVAX. It's stacked up to $17.90. And my position here is I'm expecting, or I'm wanting to sell or swap these AVAX tokens into USDC. I'm thinking the price of AVAX will go up to about $17.90. So I've concentrated my AVAX tokens over 5 bins, and that's gradually increasing because I want to reduce the amount of potential, essentially impermanent loss I could gain from selling these AVAX. So I'm mainly putting the majority of my AVAX, the last 3 bins, up to 17.90. I've got some of my AVAX a bit lower down, but my full intention here is, my strategy is, I want to sell these AVAX tokens for USDC. And you know what we've seen, certainly we've seen a number of times on Arbitrum actually, is people are using Liquidity Book to sell or buy tokens by deploying this type of strategy. The advantages of essentially doing this is by providing liquidity on just one side of the market. So in this example, AVAX, I'm capturing any movement in price by converting that AVAX into USDC. And that's essentially me swapping my AVAX for USDC. And you know why I would use Liquidity Book to do that is, well, because I don't, instead of just trading my tokens and having to pay a trade fee, potentially causing a price impact. So that's more, more cost on my side to swap that token. Maybe I'm causing slippage on that trade as well. So, essentially, instead of just trading it and incurring a cost on my side, I can just deploy this liquidity into a Liquidity Book pool and just wait for the price to just naturally move. And if it moves and converts all of my AVAX into USDC, great. I've just essentially sold my AVAX for USDC. Hasn't cost me anything because I paid no swap fees for it, because the price, it was just naturally converted in the liquidity pool. And also, I've earned some trading fees for doing that as well, because I provided liquidity. I earned fees for doing that. So, some people commented saying, you can essentially trade your tokens using a Liquidity Book pool and get paid to trade, because you're earning fees by doing this. And there's some level of strategy and analysis involved to understand that, well, and monitoring as well, because you kind of have to watch this position to withdraw your tokens once it's all converted. So this is more of a tactile approach at trading in or out of a token. And this is particularly powerful if you have a large amount of tokens as well, because if you want to trade 7 figures, there's going to be some level of price impact for doing that. If even if you want to trade 6 figures or 5 figures in some cases, depending on how much liquidity is on chain, there's going to be a level of inefficient trading going on via a price impact or potential slippage. So, and the specific examples we've seen 6 to 7 figures, essentially of more illiquid tokens or tokens which aren't trading that high. We've seen people scale in or out of those tokens. A particular example of someone scaling out 7 figures of one token, they used Liquidity Book to do that. It was an incredibly illiquid token, but the versatility that Liquidity Book offered is they were able to deposit tokens, slightly below market price, and let arbitrageurs kind of take those tokens for cheap and sell them elsewhere. And this is a really smart way of scaling out of a token with essentially no cost of doing so. So, kind of couple of examples of how you can use Liquidity Book to trade a token essentially and get paid for doing that. Now so good question. So to deploy this specific shape, so ladder in or out, this is a bid-ask shape. And what I've done here is, on this example, because you can enter the exact amount of tokens that you want to deposit on both sides of the market, in this example, I pretty much entered like 99% of the tokens in this pool from my position were AVAX. So I put in 100 AVAX, not 100, $100 worth of AVAX, and then I put in $1 worth of USDC, and it gives you a shape like that. It's pretty much all AVAX, or vice versa. And then I would have basically waited for the price to change. As soon as it converted all into USDC, I then withdraw my AVAX. Now, the good thing is we very soon, as part of V2.1 upgrade for Liquidity Book, in a few weeks' time, we will have native limit orders implemented into Liquidity Book pools. So you can actually deposit this shape and enter a price target that you want a smart contract to withdraw that liquidity for you. And it will withdraw that if that price target's hit. So it will automate this process for you, and you just claim your tokens whenever you want. So you can basically set this perfectly up and come back. If it's hit, great, you just withdraw it. You can check back next week and it will be waiting for you. That's Maker native limit orders. I'm really excited for that feature. Any questions on this? Earn by DCA, that's pretty much the point. Davide, any comments on that?
No, you covered it greatly.
Covered it greatly. Thank you so much. So in terms of sticking with the DCA in or out kind of theme, what we've got here is ranged limit orders. In this example, ETH Joe pool, and you'll see there's 5 different spaced out bars. And what this position is, this is a spot uniform position deposited 5 times over. So I've come along here, I've put 1 ETH in this bin, very close to the active price, and then I put 2 ETH, slightly lower, and then I put 3 ETH. You get a picture, 4 ETH, and then 5 ETH, and I've really spaced out and stacked the ETH greater as I've gone further along the price curve. And my conviction here is, I'm wanting to scale into Joe. I'm wanting to sell my ETH to buy some Joe. I'm expecting, Joe's, it's not that volatile, but I'm expecting some volatility. So I'm spacing out my orders because I'm expecting some level of price range over the coming weeks or so. But I want to scale into Joe. I have conviction with the Joe token. So I'm selling my ETH. I'm setting up spaced out orders, and I'm stacking them greater further out because I want to maximize my potential capital appreciation with buying Joe. So I'm really putting in a lot of ETH at the lower end of the price range, just in case if the ratio of ETH Joe does go down to that low, I'm buying with maximum conviction because I'm I have my strategy and my conviction. I'm expecting big gains for Joe coming up. So I'm willing to buy more Joe using more of my ETH at a lower price range. And I've done this by deploying spot uniform, as I said, one bin, and I've just taken different price points and stacked them further down. David, you slightly interrupted me. What is there a comment on this?
No,
No comment.
these
Okay.
strategies that we have seen being applied by vaults, for example. So
Yes.
these
Good
are
highlight.
for similar to what you might have seen from stake at vaults position, as an example here, where they put the liquidity in a bit more distant bins.
Yes. It's a popular strategy. We see it deployed a lot. Okay. Next, we've got 15 minutes. Sell wall. Ah, I put this in the wrong position. This is a high conviction sell wall. I guess we can cover it slightly again. I've stacked 95% of my liquidity in AVAX over that range of 17, pretty much 75, up to 1850. You know, big resistance at this price point. That's my random conviction here with this shape. Big price resistance. I don't think AVAX will go higher. I've got a bunch of AVAX. I'm just going to farm some fees around this resistance level. Davide, do you want to add anything onto sell wall? Have you deployed a sell wall before? I've essentially got one with ETH just in the wrong way around because the markets have moved a lot at the moment.
Yeah, sell walls can also be considered just a upwards directional position, not necessarily into selling, but rather in expecting that, for example, this you might be deploying liquidity at the bottom of an expected range, and therefore
My
you
battery just
think,
went in my headset, so I just have to change it quickly.
and therefore the idea of a sell wall could just be that you expect the movement to be only on the right side of this range rather than the left side, or you want to provide single-sided liquidity only on the right side.
Do you have any other questions? Can see ops chat. Don't know if you can mute or something. Can see ops chat. Don't know if you can mute it. Oh, my Telegram. Let me just close that down. Can you see ops? Okay, hopefully you can't see ops chat anymore. God, thank God it wasn't something alpha or confidential.
Don't worry, we only saw the spot. We
Oh,
are not
lovely.
seeing other
Okay.
windows. Alpha is not leaked.
Right. What else have we got here? Spot one bin concentration. What it says on the tin. This is liquidity deployed in one bin. This example here is Tether and ETH. Probably not the liquidity pool. You want to put liquidity in one bin. This is much more common and popular, obviously, in stable liquidity pools, mainly the blue chip stables. So, for example, USDC and bridged USDC. So that's USDC.E. You see the majority of liquidity stacked in one bin. And that's pretty much because the trading, it doesn't really move around, for example, $1. Sometimes you get a little bit of variance, but not much. So this is the most concentrated position that you can get in with the lowest BIP discretization we have is 2 bips. Our stable pools. So this is one bin. It's very concentrated. David, do you want to add anything onto that? Do you have stable positions in one bin? I have stable positions in one bin.
Right.
That's my personal conviction. That's not financial advice. Davide?
Yeah, it's
Yep.
that's a particular flavor if someone is very into that bin and really loves that bin.
Yes. It's a favorite bin for many people. Credo. That's my shape. Good to know. Now, what you can do actually, with Liquidity Book, you don't just have to pick certain bins. You can, of course, deploy multiple times using spot or other shapes as well, but you can deploy multiple times. And so this example here, we've got spot tranche. And you'll see this example on the actual pool, USDC, USDT. So it's a blue chip stable coin pool. The majority of my liquidity here is in the $1 bin. I'd say maybe 90%, but I've tranched it. So what that means is I've then gone in and deployed another shape. The bins either side of the $1 bin, I put maybe 5% or about 5% of liquidity into those bins, and then I've gone on the bins either side of that as well, and I put a couple of percent in those bins. And then for some reason, I've just decided to have a widespread, well, not widespread, I'll deploy liquidity into a range of 20 bins either side of $1. And I'll just put the last, 1 to 2% of my liquidity in those bins. Just trying to give a flavor of customization in terms of how you can really tranche your liquidity. But, what we see in some of these stablecoin pools is a tranched approach like this with liquidity distribution across those 5 key bins. So the majority of liquidity will be in $1 because that's pretty much where all the trading happens. But people do have that liquidity just either side of that to capture those moments of slight volatility. And you can go slightly wider as well. You might think, well, most of the trading happens in the $1 bin. Why would I even put liquidity just outside of that? The prices do move slightly. And because there's less liquidity in those bins either side, it can create greater opportunities for you to capture a larger share of trading fees when that volatility does happen. So, this comes into your own personal strategy and conviction and analysis. And Liquidity Book is there to facilitate that for you. So you can deploy a few times into one pool to get this type of spot kind of tranche shape. Checking comments, someone's done a salute. That's cool. David, any comments on a tranched approach with spot?
Yeah, this is your example of a stable coin is pretty much where a shape like this will usually be applied, where you will hope it will stay $1 and just move slightly, but remain there for the foreseeable future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we shared some. If you check the announcements channel in this Discord, scroll up a tiny bit, you'll probably see a white kind of image of some analytics straight out of a stablecoin pool. You can see fee accrual in that stablecoin pool. It pretty much looks like this, like the majority of the fees in that $1 bin, and then either side. So some actual kind of analytics there. Spots wide. So I think this is actually customized to spot wide, but there is a wide shape on the UI. If you press wide, it will give you a predefined deployment over 50 bins. It's a pretty solid shape if you want to capture what you think is medium to lower volatility intraday trading for a number of pairs, like the larger pairs, such as in this example, ETH, USDT. Using wide, you'll probably capture a decent amount of volatility using that shape. If there are any large movements, it's not really a shape that you can just kind of deploy and come back to a week later. You will need to monitor that shape still. I would say, every day. That that's personally what I do. That's not financial advice. That's kind of like some insight into my own personal management of that. But essentially, wide is a good shape to capture intraday volatility. If there's anything major going on, it's probably, you may find, it will need to be repositioned. So that's Davide. Any input on wide there?
Well, I
It's not
think
the
I
passive
think that
approach I'm just trying to
this
get
is your
across.
one of your preferred day-to-day distributions, probably, right?
This is if you can commit to monitoring prices every day throughout the day, wide would be a relatively good lower stress shape on major pairs that are volatile.
Yeah, usually I would believe that this pair is more of an interest for someone which desire indeed to feel more like a market maker, like a liquidity provider which wants to provide liquidity of a pair uh, regardless of the direction, and as you were mentioning, rebalancing possibly daily or when the range is when the position is out of a range. But this position is more for someone that believes that that the fees collected for whichever movement are the real interest, as it's not really positioned, it's for max fee gathering rather for max exposure.
Yes, max fee gathering, exactly. Conscious of time, moving on. Ultra wide. So this is probably one of the best kept secrets on the UI or UX. You can deploy over any width of price range that you want to. You can go wider than wide. You can go ultra wide. So in this example, USDC AVAX, pretty much from about $12 up to about $26. I think this was over like 200 bins or 400. But essentially, using spot, you can enter any price range you want on the minimum side and also on the maximum side. So you can deploy over 1,000 bins if you want to. So going ultra wide will give you that more passive approach, where on this particular example, I probably may not need to check every day. When I deployed it, our AVAX was like what's just under $18. It would have to be really bad for me to wake up one day and see AVAX going from $18 down to about $12. So it's that level of price range that you can, in this particular example, that allows me to probably take a passive approach and not feel like I have to check every day. You can go wider than this. I could go from $5 AVAX up to $100, and it's still more capital efficient than the X times Y equals K AMM Uniswap V2 fork. So I'm still able to capitalize on enhanced efficiency, but also I can still take pretty much a passive approach with my liquidity provisioning. So go to spot, enter price ranges that you want to provide liquidity on. You'll have to deploy your liquidity multiple times, but you can get an ultra wide position. And we're pretty much at the end of the workshop. We've got about 2 minutes left. I just want to shill one of the first updates we've done thanks to our new backend. This is called the bins traded graph or chart. This is in the analytics page for each liquidity book pool. And this lovely visualization will help you understand the volume of trading that happens within each bin of a specific liquidity book pool. And this is useful because you can understand over the last 24 hours currently, that's what it gives you the view of where all the trading activity happens. So it's insight to inform you of previous areas of high trading activity, and also the opposite as well, of where price just went up or down really fast and no trading activity happened. And you can use this insight to understand where you may want to deploy liquidity, moving forward. If you're always seeing a certain bin get a lot of trading activity, maybe that's a good pin to try and enhance how much liquidity you have in. Maybe that's a hot area of support resistance that is always traded, that always sees lots of turnover. If you're there to farm fees, these are the bins you want to look out for. So hopefully we're going to carry on building on the analytics that's available on the front end with our new dedicated back end. So we'll be able to continue enriching how much analytics and insight you can get. Any last minute comments before I shut this down? I've probably got a couple minutes before I can leave and join late. I guess just to highlight again, if you join midway through, this is recorded. It'll go up on the YouTube as soon as possible, and you can watch us back in your own leisure. Any comments or questions? Really nice hearing. Thank you, Pong. Very nice of you. Thank you for your question as well. What roles do you have? I mean, you've been playing Dota 2 for 49 minutes, so you're multitasking. Appreciate that. True. You sound like a DeFi degen, just doing all these things at once. You don't have many roles though, so please join. If you're here, if you're a grey boy, you don't have any coloured roles, please join our guild. It's in the channel. Join the club, join the guild. You can unlock roles. You can earn yourself roles if you turn up to these calls as well. I may even give you roles. Pong, if you turn up tomorrow, I might give you a special hero role for a week. How about that? 1 year. Oh, you've been here for 1 year as well. You've been here longer than 1 year. Jesus, October. Oh no, that's Discord. Discord. Okay. Giving Pong lots of attention. Is there any other questions before I close this down?
Thank you very much, Blue. You've been extremely good in explaining all the different shapes. So
thank you, Davide. Thank you for joining me up on the stage. Nice. Okay. Well, I'd show the market maker rewards at the moment. Liquidity Book rewards program. If you're earning fees in the rewards pools, you may be unlocking Joe token rewards. You do need to qualify to unlock those rewards. You do need to have earned at least 1% of total fees within each of those specific pools that you're active in. If you earn at least 1% of total fees over the 2-week period, you will be able to claim some Joe rewards. So yeah, lots of opportunity there for the budding market maker. It's not a whale game either. Epoch 1 average maker TVL was about 10K, which isn't a crazy amount. It's very reachable for some of us. So yeah, don't feel disheartened. I'll make a program. That's a whale game. That's 7 figures or 6 figures. It's not. It's really not. You can run optimized strategies with very low 5 figures and still unlock Joe rewards easy or even less. Anyway, I'll finish now. There's someone else typing. I'm just going to wait for Ivan to finish typing just to see if there's a question. Question about data storage of Liquidity Book. Do you guys already have an understanding how to store and work with Liquidity Book data? Reconstruct dynamics, reconstruct LB dynamics. That's definitely a general manager Davide question.
Well, you will. Okay, well, this is also a question of what you are trying to achieve. It's probably reading the okay, like building the bins traded was a very complex approach, for example, and this is a reconstruction of Liquidity Book dynamics. I will say that retail user will have an hard time trying to rebuild the entire dynamics of everything that happens on LB. And if someone is interested in doing it, we definitely want to talk to you and seeing the great work you're doing. Overall, it is a complex product which is easier to look at when you're talking about your own positions, but the historical performance, we try to give every day more tools to analyze what you are calling the LB dynamics directly from the front end.
Does that answer your question, Ivan? Thank you. Well done. Got that question and answer. Both of those went over my head completely.
They are read on chain. That's the answer to
Yes.
Ivan. Instead of stored, they're reconstructed by on-chain transactions.
Very good. Ivan's typing once more. Oh, I am B&B adventurer from Pong.
Great.
Type quickly. Gotta close it down shortly. I'll rephrase my questions sometime when I have a bit more clear mind. Okay, let's crowdfund the graph index. Okay, right, closing it down, guys. Thanks so much for joining. I hope you found this useful. It'll go up on YouTube after. Please join the community call tomorrow, same time. NFTs going out. Pong, I want to see you there, so don't let me down.